The book I read was titled Why Are All the Black Kids Sitting Together in the Cafeteria and Other Conversations About Race by Beverly Daniel Tatum, published in 1997. Beverly Tatum is a clinical psychologist who currently serves as a president at Spelman College. I chose this book because at Beechwood, it is almost true that the black kids do sit together in the cafeteria, and I wanted to understand how we got to this point. In this book, she openly discusses racism and racial development. She begins by telling a story of when a student told her they didn't think racism still exists and defines what she believes racism is and why it is still evident in today's society. She defines racial prejudice and racism as separate things. Racial prejudice is a preconceived judgment or opinion that is based on limited information and is inevitable in everyone. Racism is a system involving cultural messages and institutional policies and practices, as well as the beliefs and the actions of individuals. Throughout the book, she discusses theories and stories to stimulate conversations about race. Throughout the book, Tatum discusses multiple topics and theories that we study in sociology, typically racial and ethnic relations. First is identity. In class, we talked about social structure and how we have different statuses. Tatum does the same in her book. She poses the question of who am I and explains Cooley's theory of the looking glass self, where other people serve as a mirror in which we view ourselves as others view us. She also states how we have multiple identities and people are defined by 7 categories: race, gender, religion, sexual orientation, socioeconomic status, age, and physical or mental ability. And in each category, there is a group seen as dominant. Next is social development. In class, we studied Piaget's theory on human gender and Erikson's theory of psychosocial development. Beverly Tatum also uses a theory of racial development. It begins in preschool where children as young as 3 notice physical differences like skin color and hair texture. She shares a story of her son watching a white mom helping her biracial child put on her boots at his preschool. He asks Tatum, "Why don't they match, Mommy? You and I match, they don't match. Mommies and kids are supposed to match." Her son was so used to seeing a black child with a black mom or a white child with a white mom that when he didn't, he started to question. Another story she mentions is her other son telling her about a student's comment at his daycare. Her son says, "He told me my skin is brown because I drink too much chocolate milk. Mommy, is that true?" Then there's adolescence. During this time, students, typically blacks, start to ask themselves what it means to be black. They start to absorb the beliefs and values of the dominant white race. They see and read stereotypes and think that being white is better. Certain styles of speech, dress, and music are also deemed as black. Also in school, they start to notice that blacks are more likely to be in the lower track than the honors track. The students that are the only blacks in their class find it odd and start to wonder why. Here she answers the question of why all blacks sit together in the cafeteria. She says they do because the black people provide a sense of support that the white students don't understand. Tatum also highlights that yes, there are blacks sitting together, but there are also whites. But nobody ever seems to notice or talk about that. Last is adulthood. During college, people have had their racial encounters and are ready to explore their racial identity. People associate with other races, but it is still prevalent that they are more comfortable with people of the same descent. She states that even in corporate offices, black men and women still have lunch and sit together. The last topic that is both discussed in our class and this book is minority groups. When people talk about racism, they typically think about blacks, but Tatum stresses the fact that it is more than just blacks and whites. She discusses how Latinos, Asians, and Indians' development differs from each other because of their distinct paths of their race. She discusses Finney's model of adolescence ethnic identity in its three stages. Unexamined ethnic identity, when race or ethnicity is not important for the individual. Ethnic identity search, when the individuals are actively engaged in defining for themselves what it means to be a member of their own racial or ethnic group. And lastly, achieve ethnic identity, when individuals are able to assert a clear positive sense of racial or ethnic identity. The sociological perspective that Tatum presents is conflict theory. She uses race and inequality to show the problems in society. She says that people are afraid to speak out about the topic of race in fear of being naive and offensive. It is also true because Tatum discusses how social structure typically benefits some and deprive others, which is an accurate characteristic of the conflict theory. Some pros of this book is it is written by an African American. She knows firsthand what it is like to be a minority in society, and her story is very accurate. Also, it is not just filled with her words. She uses interviews with her students and quotes by people to enlighten individuals. A con of this book is that, for the most part, she focuses on blacks and whites and leaves the other races to a small section. I think it would be more powerful to focus on minorities as a whole. However, I do recommend this book because it is very interesting and you get a different outlook on race and society. Also, it is not a hard read and is broken up into different sections, which makes it easier to follow. I will recommend this book to a teenager because you are in the middle stage of Tatum's theory, and it is fascinating to look back on your childhood and see if you were the way Tatum depicted. Also, you would get a sense of what your racial development would be like once you get older. Even though this book was written by a psychologist, I will recommend this book to a sociology class because it discusses some sociologist perspectives and ideas. Also, Tatum is well respected, educated, and has received multiple awards for her work. Finally, there are still questions that I still have. One for Tatum would be, since she is the president at an all-black women's college, how does Spelman try and deal with the needs of students with different backgrounds? Another question would be, why is it so hard for people to be colorblind in society? Thanks for listening to my review on Why Do All the Black Kids Sit Together in the Cafeteria and Other Conversations About Race by Beverly Daniel Tatum.